ZTE had been bracing for a US exit after suspending its main business operations last week. It faced a 7-year ban for violating export sanctions imposed by the US, which meant losing business from its biggest clients, Qualcomm, Intel, and Google, which provide 25 to 30% of components for ZTE's products. But a tweet from the US president could mean a reversal of the ban.
President Xi of China and I are working together to give massive Chinese phone company ZTE a way to get back into business fast. Too many jobs in China lost. Commerce Department has been instructed to get it done.
China has welcomed the decision and expressed its commitment to resolve differences on ZTE.
We highly commend the positive remark from the US on the ZTE issue, and we are now in close communication with the US side on details of implementation.
Trump also expressed his optimism about ongoing Sino-US trade talks. US officials are preparing to host a Chinese trade delegation in Washington this week. Heading the team is Liu He, China's top economic advisor. The two sides acknowledged major differences after meeting in Beijing 2 weeks ago. China refused to budge on the US's long list of demands, which included cutting its trade deficit by $200 billion by 2020. But Trump's decision to help ZTE get back on its feet is seen as a positive step towards putting those talks back on track.
Donald Trump has definitely set a positive tone for ZTE, and especially at this time that the Chinese government is going to have another round with trade talk with the US government.
US lawmakers are less welcoming of Trump's decision, raising security-related issues.
Our intelligence agencies have warned that ZTE technology and phones pose a major cybersecurity threat. You should care more about our national security than Chinese jobs.
For now, thousands of ZTE employees still have their jobs, while Chinese trade officials get down to work to keep it that way. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
David Madden is an analyst at CMC Markets in London. He says despite the good news, markets in Europe are less than optimistic.
I think this is a classic Trump move whereby he starts off talking tough, talking about how he wants to make America great again and readdress the trading imbalance between the US and China. Now he's showing a softer side as the negotiations draw closer. I think this is just a typical ploy by Mr. Trump to start off with the worst case scenario, the threat of tariffs on Chinese imports, and to show that he means business. But then he kind of softens up to say, you know what, I am willing to compromise, and if you're willing to compromise too, perhaps we can actually reach a deal. Here in Europe, things are a bit less optimistic, not for any kind of particular major reason in relation to US trade, just more so that European equity markets, particularly the FTSE 100, have had a great run in recent weeks. And now that we're seeing actually no kind of additional good news to kind of continue on that buying momentum, we are seeing some of the buyers just take a breather. But I suspect, given how kind of strong the European markets have been for the past, say, 6 to 8 weeks, it is looking likely that the positive trend here in Europe will continue.
Well, Editor-at-Large Craig Kapitas joins us from Miami for more on this. Craig, thanks as always. Firstly, we know Donald Trump is a man of contradictions, but why is the US president all of a sudden so keen to save a Chinese company, ZTE, and in the process potentially tens of thousands of Chinese jobs?
He's obviously throwing the Chinese a fortune cookie before their trade delegation arrives here in the United States later this week to work out some sort of trade deal with China. On the other hand, you're hearing a lot of fire and brimstone out of Washington this morning. What kind of Faustian deal is Trump playing at here? Because ZTE, whatever you want to call it, however you want to pronounce it, is still listed as a national security threat here in the United States. And what's perhaps even more interesting, it's a national security threat in the United Kingdom, according to the British government. So the allies today are very confused. ZTE is popular in the US, but it's still the prince of darkness across the pond in the United Kingdom.
Yes, and we know that before the US sanctions hit ZTE, it relied heavily on US firms to supply it with various components so that it could continue to make millions of smartphones and gadgets that it does. I'm wondering, do you think there's an element of pressure coming from those US firms?
Well, you can only wonder. It seems kind of logical, but the other question that's being asked here is what kind of interest does Trump and or his cronies have in this company, which is listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange? And it's also raising questions about this interface between tech and national security and military interests. You know, just a few days ago, a dozen people at Google walked out over something called Project Maven, which is a Pentagon program that speeds up the analysis of drone footage. Much of the same equipment is involved in that. Google employees have voiced loud opposition against this type of work. 6.5% of their workforce of 65,000 people signed a petition on this. So what we're seeing here, these might seem like two disparate issues, but what we're seeing here is a coming together of this national security technology that a lot of people in the tech community don't want to see their companies becoming involved in.
Yes, so I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens at the second round of trade talks in Washington. Craig Kopitas, thank you as always.